So, today we're going to talk briefly about tools for watering by hand and how we think about water delivery across life stages of different seedling crops. First of all, in terms of tools by hand, we happen to have this particular watering can here. This is a Hawes watering can, but really any sort of 1 to 2 gallon size can that you might have can be really helpful to delivering water in small areas and small quantities of water. The head or rows from which the water comes out, the more holes, the finer the droplet size, the more gently it's going to deliver that water. A can like this, we simply take it, we tip it back, we get the water running, and then we're going to move back and forth over the containers or surface area that we want to water. Whereas if I'm going to water with something attached to a hose, probably not going to be doing this inside, except for inside a greenhouse. But if you were watering seedlings on a bench or table outside, this can allow you to do a lot more without having to constantly go back and refill your watering can. So in this case, we have a dram watering wand, and then this piece at the end is called a water breaker. And if you look at this head here, you'll see many, many small holes drilled into this metal plate. And that, again, slows and distributes the water pressure more gently on the seedling surface. Another really key thing to think about when you're watering lots of young seedlings is some sort of shutoff valve. This one happens to have this on-off valve right here, but some sort of little lever or dial that's going to allow you to turn the water on when you want it, turn it off when you don't want it, is really valuable, both for conserving water and so that you deliver the right amount of water. So in this instance, I'm going to turn the water on, get the pressure adjusted before I actually start watering, and then same, I would just go back and forth. If you take a look at my technique here, when I'm thinking about watering ungerminated things like this tray here, for example, you can see a little bit of darkness where the soil is still moist, and then a bunch of the cells are nice and dry. Somewhere in the 20 to 30% surface dry down is when I'm going to think about watering in, again, ungerminated and just germinating seedlings. That's important because just germinating seeds don't need a lot of water, but they need somewhat continuous availability of water to help fuel the germination process. So when I see a situation like this with ungerminated material, then I'm going to come and I'm going to provide maybe just 1 or 2 passes of water, depending on what the temperatures are like. If it's hotter, I might go back and forth a couple plus times. If it's not a particularly warm day, just a back and forth like I just did might be all you really need. And again, that could be accomplished with by hand with a can, or by hand with a hose and some sort of implement on the end. We happen to really like the watering wand and the water breaker because it allows us to really reach and go further distance without having to bend our backs too much. So next we're going to take a look at some more developed seedlings. What you see here, just germinated, beginning to grow. In most conditions, I'm going to think about watering those maybe 2 to 3 times a day on a warm, sunny day, maybe even more. But I only am going to be 1 or 2 quick passes back and forth. When I get to this stage here, where I've got full germination and I've got young seedlings, then I'm not going to be watering as many times per day, but when I do water, I'm going to deliver a greater volume of water so that water pushes further down into the depth of the container that I'm working with. So instead of just 1 or 2 passes, I might be looking at 3 or 4 passes back and forth like this. The main thing I want to avoid is stopping in any one place for any period of time, because if I do that, I'm going to start to really supersaturate the space, and I'm going to start to run soil off and out of the container. So when we're watering, we're thinking about kind of continuous motion so that we're not puddling and pooling, but rather covering a large area, back and forth, back and forth. So the last thing we want to look at is how do we think about watering mature seedlings? And in this case, I've got some almost fully mature broccoli and chard here. So again, I'm going to think about watering these plants a little bit less frequently over the course of the day, maybe only once or twice a day. But when I water, I really want to water to the full depth of the container that they're in. And these happen to be about 2.5 inches deep, but whatever the container that you're in, if the roots have run to the bottom, you're going to want to make sure you're delivering water to the bottom. So in an instance like this, I'm going to get my hose set up, and then I'm just going to go back and forth, kind of same consistent pattern motion. If I have a larger block to water, not just a couple, trays of plants, then I'm going to move back and forth across the whole block, maybe 1 or 2 passes before I circle back to this end, and then provide a couple more passes, and ultimately, in a container like this, I probably need to go 5 or 6 passes back and forth to really get to the full depth of the plants. But it would be better if I do that by kind of spreading it out over time a little bit, so that each time I go back and forth, there's a little bit of time for that water to infiltrate down and in before additional water comes along. So just to recap briefly, we can water by hand with a number of things. It could be a watering can if you're working in a relatively small space. If you've got larger volume, some sort of watering device attached to a hose is going to be tremendously helpful in terms of saving some time and not having to go back and forth, refilling your can all the time. And then with ungerminated plants, usually I'm going to be watering very, very shallowly, but multiple times a day. As my seedlings develop, I'm going to water to a greater depth and a little bit less frequently. When I get to full maturity, or in this case, nearly full maturity, I absolutely need to water to the full depth of the container, but I'm probably only going to be watering a couple times a day at most, except for in the hottest portions of the year. And that's the basics on watering. And as with other topics, there are other videos on the Canvas site that we can link to that will go into a little bit greater depth on watering. And thank you very much.